I'm Olivia, 28 years old, and I've always been a daddy's girl. My father's 60th birthday was supposed to be special. I'd spent 2 years saving for a family trip to Italy, his ancestral home. But when I arrived at my parents' house that Tuesday, my mother's words cut deeper than any knife. "We all agreed, you're not welcome at your dad's birthday party," she said with a satisfied smirk on her face. Little did she know, her cruelty would set off a chain reaction nobody saw coming. If you're watching this, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Growing up in Denver, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. While my career as a financial advisor eventually took me to Chicago, my connection with my father remained my strongest family tie. Robert Walsh was the kind of dad who never missed a softball game, who taught me to change a tire before I could drive, and who slipped encouraging notes into my lunchbox throughout middle school. He was my rock, steady, reliable, and loving, in a family dynamic that often felt like quicksand. My mother, Caroline, was a different story. From my earliest memories, she maintained a cool distance from me while lavishing attention on my older brother Tyler. The family photos tell the story: Tyler and Mom, arms linked and smiling, while Dad and I stood slightly apart. It wasn't that she was cruel, at least not obviously. It was more subtle: the forgotten birthdays, the dismissed achievements, the constant comparison to my more successful brother. "Why can't you be more like Tyler?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Tyler, for years older and seemingly perfect in every way, excelled at sports, brought home straight A's, and somehow always managed to meet our mother's impossible standards. I tried, God knows I tried, but my best was never quite enough for Caroline Walsh. When I graduated from Northwestern with my finance degree and landed my first job at Meridian Financial Group, Mom's response was predictable. "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Tyler just made partner at his law firm?" Always the comparison, always coming up short. Last year, everything shifted when Dad suffered a minor heart attack. I immediately took leave from work and flew home, spending 3 weeks helping with his recovery. Mom resented my presence, making pointed comments about how I was disrupting their routine, but Dad's grateful smiles were worth every barb. During those weeks, watching Dad's mortality suddenly become real, I made a promise to myself. I would make his 60th birthday truly special. Working as a senior financial advisor had its perks, mainly a salary that allowed me to save aggressively. For 2 years, I squirreled away funds specifically for Dad's birthday surprise. By April of this year, I had amassed exactly $56,300 for what I envisioned as the perfect family trip to Italy. Dad had always talked about visiting his grandfather's village in Tuscany, tracing the Walsh family roots back to their original name, Valsecchi. This would be his chance. When I first proposed the idea during a family dinner 6 months ago, the responses seemed positive. Dad's eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Tuscany? Really? You'd do that for me?" His excitement was all the confirmation I needed. Tyler nodded appreciatively, his wife Rebecca chiming in about Italian vineyards she'd always wanted to visit. Even Mom seemed cautiously supportive, asking practical questions about timing and accommodations. I left that dinner feeling hopeful, already mentally planning the perfect 10-day Italian adventure. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. The way Mom's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when discussing the trip. The subtle change in Tyler's tone when he asked how I could afford such an extravagant gift. The increasing frequency of Mom accidentally scheduling other events whenever I tried to discuss trip details. "Oh, I forgot you were coming over to talk about Italy today," she'd say, ushering in her Bridge Club members as I arrived with travel brochures. "We can chat another time." Another time never seemed to materialize, but I remained optimistic. This was for Dad, after all. Surely everyone would come around once they saw how much it meant to him. How naive I was. By February, with Dad's June birthday approaching, I took 2 weeks off work to finalize the trip details. My apartment transformed into trip planning central, with maps of Tuscany taped to walls and Italian phrase books stacked on every surface. I'd spent countless nights researching the perfect location, finally settling on a villa in Montepulciano with enough bedrooms for the whole family and breathtaking views of the surrounding vineyards. The property's elderly owners, the Bianchi family, were delighted to hear about our family's Italian roots and promised a personal wine tasting from their small production vineyard. "Your father will love it here," Signora Bianchi assured me during our video call. "We welcome him home to his ancestral land." Those words brought tears to my eyes. This was exactly what I wanted for Dad, a connection to his heritage, a chance to walk the same streets his grandfather had walked a century ago. I even managed to track down distant relatives still living in the area. Cousins several times removed, the Ricci family, who shared our ancestral name and still maintained the family's original olive grove. They sent photographs of ancient family records mentioning my great-great-grandfather's name before he emigrated to America. I imagined Dad's face when he met them, when he held those records in his hands, when he tasted olive oil produced from trees his ancestors had planted. Each detail I secured felt like another gift I could give him. I researched cooking classes where we could learn to make traditional pasta, arranged for a private tour of Siena's medieval center, and even booked a day trip to Florence to see the art Dad had always admired from afar. Every confirmation email felt like another piece of a perfect puzzle falling into place. While my excitement grew, my family's enthusiasm seemed to wane. Mom began suggesting alternative celebrations during our weekly phone calls. "Your father might prefer something simple," she said one evening. "You know how he gets overwhelmed by too much fuss." This from the woman who had thrown herself elaborate birthday parties for decades. Dad was allegedly overwhelmed by a trip to Italy, but Mom wasn't overwhelmed by the 100-guest garden parties she threw herself each May. Tyler became increasingly difficult to reach. My texts about flight options went unanswered for days. When he did respond, his replies were perfunctory at best. "Whatever you think is best," he'd text, without engaging with any specific details. Rebecca, always the peacemaker, occasionally reached out with vague encouragement, but offered little practical input. "I'm sure whatever you plan will be lovely," became her standard response. Only Dad maintained genuine enthusiasm, asking questions about our itinerary and practicing Italian phrases with charming ineptitude. "Buongiorno, come stay," he'd greet me, his American accent mangling the vowels, but his eyes sparkling with anticipation. 3 months before the trip, Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. I arrived bearing gifts, a guidebook for Dad and Italian coffee for everyone. The atmosphere felt strained from the moment I walked in. Tyler and Rebecca were already there, huddled in conversation with Mom that abruptly halted when I entered the room. "We were just discussing summer plans," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. Throughout dinner, whenever I mentioned Italy, the conversation mysteriously shifted. Dad would begin asking questions, only to be interrupted by Mom offering more potatoes or Tyler suddenly remembering work anecdotes that couldn't wait. It felt coordinated, this conversational redirection, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid. After dessert, I stepped into the hallway to take a call from my boss. As I finished, I overheard Mom and Tyler in the kitchen, their voices just loud enough to carry. "She's completely taken over his birthday," Mom was saying. "As if she's the only one who knows what Robert wants." "I know," Tyler responded. "It's always been like this, Olivia and Dad in their own little world. We need to do something before she finalizes everything. Your father deserves a proper celebration, not some exhausting trip at his age." Their words froze me in place. The dismissal in their tones, the resentment. Was that how they saw my gift? As a selfish attempt to monopolize Dad? I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach, questioning everything. Was I pushing this trip for Dad, or for myself? Was I ignoring what he truly wanted? When Dad called the next morning specifically to ask about the cooking class I'd mentioned, his genuine excitement reassured me. This wasn't about me versus them. This was about giving Dad a dream he'd held onto for decades. With renewed determination, I continued planning, but the undercurrent of resistance from Mom and Tyler grew stronger. Each family interaction became increasingly tense, with passive-aggressive comments evolving into more direct opposition. Dad might be saying yes to spare your feelings, Tyler suggested during a rare phone conversation. You know how he hates disappointing people. The insinuation stung, that I somehow couldn't tell when my own father was being sincere. That I was bullying him into a trip he secretly dreaded. What hurt most was how they underestimated Dad in the process, treating him like a child who couldn't make his own decisions. My 60-year-old father, still working full-time as an engineering professor, suddenly needed protection from the burden of a family vacation. The tension built like pressure in a sealed container, with no release valve in sight. Something had to give. In early March, with airline tickets needing finalization, Mom texted asking me to come over to discuss birthday plans. Finally, I thought. Progress. Maybe they've accepted that this trip is happening and want to contribute ideas. I arrived at my parents' suburban home on a Thursday evening, noting Tyler's Audi in the driveway. Normally, he'd text when he was visiting from his side of town, another small sign something was off. The familiar ranch-style house looked the same as always, but something felt different as I walked up the stone path to the front door. Inside, I found Mom, Tyler, and Rebecca seated in the living room, an impromptu family meeting already in progress. Their conversation halted abruptly when I entered, like a TV show paused mid-scene. The silence felt deliberate, weighted. "Where's Dad?" I asked, noticing his absence. "Thursday Golf League," Mom replied. "We thought it would be better to talk without him first." Red flag number 1. I took a seat on the edge of the sofa, suddenly feeling like a job applicant rather than a family member. Mom sat unnaturally straight in her armchair, hands folded in her lap like she was preparing to deliver rehearsed lines. "We've been thinking about your birthday plans for your father," she began, emphasizing the "your" in a way that immediately set me on edge. "While the trip idea is interesting, we think something local would be more appropriate." More appropriate? I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "Yes," Tyler jumped in, lawyer mode activated. "We've discussed it extensively, and a local celebration makes more sense for everyone." "Everyone except Dad," I countered. "He's excited about Italy." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably on the couch, examining her manicure with sudden interest. "Your father is being polite," Mom said dismissively. "At his age, a transatlantic trip would be exhausting. We're thinking of hosting a garden party here instead." Family, friends, colleagues, people who truly matter to him. The implication that I somehow didn't fall into that category wasn't lost on me. "I've already put deposits down on accommodations," I explained, trying to keep my voice level. "The villa, the tours, everything. Dad's been practicing Italian for months." "Financial concerns shouldn't dictate what's best for Dad," Tyler said, his tone condescending. "If you're worried about losing money on deposits, I'm sure we can work something out." The insinuation that my concerns were merely financial, rather than about Dad's wishes, sent a surge of anger through me. 2 years of careful saving and planning dismissed in a single sentence. "This isn't about money," I insisted. "It's about what Dad wants." "Have any of you actually asked him?" "We know what's best for your father," Mom said firmly. "He'll be turning 60, not 16. He doesn't need the stress of international travel." "He's 60, not 90, I countered. "He's healthy, active, and specifically told me this trip would be a dream come true." For the next hour, we talked in circles. Or rather, they presented a united front while I tried desperately to understand what was happening. Every argument I made was countered with vague concerns about Dad's preferences, his health, the impracticality of travel. Not once did anyone acknowledge his expressed enthusiasm for the trip. Let's compromise, I finally suggested, exhaustion setting in. What if we do both? A party here before we leave, then the trip for immediate family only. The glance exchange between Mom and Tyler spoke volumes. They had no intention of compromising. We'll think about it, Mom conceded, though her tone suggested otherwise. We should include your father in the next discussion. I left feeling disoriented, like I'd walked into a play midway through and didn't know my lines. In the driveway, Tyler caught up to me. Liv, he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. Try to see this from Mom's perspective. She wants to host Dad's milestone birthday. It's important to her. And Italy is important to Dad, I replied. Why does her want outweigh his? Tyler sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Just consider the party idea, okay? For family harmony. I nodded noncommittally and drove home, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I somehow missed years of Dad expressing a secret hatred for travel? Was there a health concern no one was sharing with me? Nothing added up. That night, I called Dad directly, something I rarely did. Our conversations usually happened when I called the house phone and he answered, or during my visits home. One-on-one calls weren't our norm, which made this one significant. Everything okay, sweetheart? He asked, immediately concerned by the unusual call. I'm just checking in about the Italy plans, I said carefully. Are you still excited about the trip? His voice immediately brightened. Are you kidding? I've been boring my colleagues with Tuscany facts for months. Professor Williams in engineering is threatening to move offices if I show him one more picture of Italian vineyards. The genuine enthusiasm in his voice confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a case of Dad being polite. This was something he truly wanted. Some people seem to think it might be too much for you, I ventured. Too much. He laughed. Olivia, I climb the campus stairs 20 times a day. My doctor says I'm in better shape than most 40-year-olds. Who thinks Italy would be too much? I hesitated, reluctant to create family drama. Just concerns I've heard. Well, tell whoever's concerned that this old man can handle a little pasta and wine in the Italian countryside. We chatted a bit longer before hanging up, his excitement reinforcing my determination. The trip was happening, regardless of mysterious family resistance. The next morning, I received a text from Mom. We've all discussed it further. The local party plan is moving forward. We can talk about your trip idea later. Your trip idea. As if Italy had been reduced to my personal fantasy rather than Dad's long-held dream. I tried calling multiple times over the next few days, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Texts received brief, non-committal responses. The silent treatment, Mom's favorite tactic when she wasn't getting her way. A week of silence followed, during which I wavered between anger and self-doubt. Was I being stubborn? Missing something crucial? I reached out to Dad again, but his responses were suddenly vague and distracted. Something had changed. With the final payment deadline for the villa approaching, I needed clarity. What I got instead was the beginning of the end. After a week of unanswered calls and vague text messages, I decided to stop by my parents' house unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon in late March, the kind of early spring day that teases summer warmth before plunging back into winter chill. I brought Italian pastries from a local bakery, a peace offering and a subtle reminder of the trip's purpose. As I turned onto my parents' street, I immediately noticed something unusual. Cars lined both sides of the normally quiet road. My stomach tightened as I recognized my Aunt Susan's Volvo, Uncle Patrick's pickup truck, and at least a dozen other vehicles belonging to extended family and family friends. I parked a block away and walked slowly toward the house, pastry box clutched in increasingly sweaty hands. Through the large front windows, I could see movement, people milling about the living room, gathered in conversation clusters. No one had mentioned a family gathering to me. For a moment, I considered leaving. Whatever was happening inside, I clearly hadn't been invited. But the thought of running away made something harden inside me. This was my family, too. I deserved answers. I knocked on the front door rather than using my key, suddenly feeling like a visitor rather than a daughter. My cousin Ashley opened it, her smile faltering when she saw me. Olivia. I didn't know you were coming. Apparently not, I said, keeping my voice neutral as I stepped past her into the entryway. The living and dining rooms had been transformed into Party Central. A large banner reading Robert's 60th birthday bash, June 15th, stretched across one wall. My Aunt Susan stood on a stepladder hanging decorations while my uncle discussed catering options with a woman I didn't recognize. Mom's friend Debbie was addressing envelopes at the dining table. Invitations, I realized with a sinking feeling. My mother emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee cups, freezing mid-step when she saw me. The expression that crossed her face wasn't guilt or even surprise, it was annoyance. Olivia, she said flatly. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. What's all this? Party planning committee, she said, as if it were obvious. For your father's birthday. I looked around at the committee, which apparently included every family member except me. Even distant cousin Martin from Albuquerque had somehow made the cut. You're planning Dad's party without me? Several relatives glanced awkwardly in my direction before becoming intensely interested in their coffee cups or phones. Mom set down her tray and gestured toward the kitchen. Let's talk privately. I followed her, aware of the whispers that erupted behind us. The kitchen was a disaster zone of cake samples and catering menus, evidence of extensive planning that had clearly been underway for some time. Why wasn't I included in this? I asked, keeping my voice low despite the anger building inside me. Mom busied herself rearranging dessert samples on a plate. We didn't think you'd be interested, given your alternative plans. My alternative plans? You mean the trip Dad has been excited about for months? The trip I've been saving for over 2 years to make happen. Your father has accepted that a local celebration makes more sense, she said dismissively. He understands that at his age, international travel is impractical. Did he tell you that, or did you tell him that? I challenged. Her eyes narrowed. You always think you know what's best for everyone, don't you, Olivia? Always trying to be the hero, the perfect daughter. The sudden venom in her voice startled me. This wasn't just about a birthday party or a trip. This was something deeper, something that had been festering for years. This isn't about me, I insisted. It's about Dad's birthday and what would make him happy. What would make him happy is having all his loved ones together, not being dragged across the world on some expensive trip we never asked for. The trip was always optional for everyone else, I said, frustration mounting. If you didn't want to go, you could have just said so. But Dad wants to go, and it's his birthday we're celebrating. Mom slammed a hand on the counter, causing cake samples to jump. Why can't you accept that the decision has been made? We're having a party here. That's what's happening. And what about Italy? There is no Italy, Olivia. It's not happening. Her voice had risen enough that conversations in the next room halted. In the awkward silence that followed, I could feel dozens of eyes focused on the kitchen doorway. You know what? I said quietly. Let me talk to Dad. Where is he? A flicker of something. Guilt? Worry? Crossed her face. He's not here. Where is he? Out running errands, she said, too quickly. He'll be back later. I pulled out my phone and called him. The familiar ringtone echoed from somewhere in the house. The study, if I had to guess. Mom's face tightened. He forgot his phone, she said lamely. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that I was being lied to, systematically and deliberately. My father never went anywhere without his phone. After his heart scare, it had become a security measure we all insisted upon. I think I'll wait for him, I said, pulling out a chair at the kitchen island. Panic flashed across Mom's face. That's not necessary. We're quite busy here, as you can see. I'm not leaving until I talk to Dad. I sat quietly while Mom fluttered around the kitchen, clearly flustered by my presence. After about 15 uncomfortable minutes, Tyler appeared in the doorway, obviously sent in as reinforcement. "Liv," he said with forced casualness. "Didn't expect to see you today." "Apparently no one did," I replied coolly. "Funny how that works." "Listen," he said, lowering his voice as he took the seat beside me. "This isn't personal. We just thought it would be easier to plan things separately, given the differences of opinion." "Differences of opinion?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean the fact that I actually considered what Dad wants for his birthday?" Tyler's expression hardened. "You always do this. Act like you're the only one who really knows Dad, the only one who really cares about him." "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying his birthday should reflect his wishes, not everyone else's." "And you think a 10-day trip to Italy is what a 60-year-old man wants? To be dragged around foreign countries when he could be celebrating with friends and family at home?" "Yes, actually, that's exactly what he told me he wants." Our voices had risen again, drawing attention from the other room. Mom stepped between us, her face a mask of controlled anger. "That's enough," she hissed. "You're ruining everything, as usual." Something in me snapped. Years of being the family outsider, of having my feelings dismissed, of being treated as an afterthought, it all culminated in this moment of crystal clarity. "As usual?" I echoed, standing up. "You know what? I want to know exactly what's going on here. Why am I being excluded from Dad's birthday planning? Why is everyone acting like I've committed some terrible offense by trying to give him a meaningful gift? What exactly is happening here?" The kitchen had filled with onlookers, aunts, uncles, cousins, all watching the drama unfold with uncomfortable fascination. Mom looked at their faces, then back at me, something shifting in her expression. The polite mask dropped, revealing something ugly underneath. "You want to know what's happening?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Fine. We all agreed. You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several relatives gasped. Someone, Aunt Susan, I think, murmured Caroline, in shocked disapproval. But it was the smirk that appeared on my mother's face that truly broke something inside me, the satisfied curl of her lips as she finally said out loud what she'd apparently been thinking for weeks, maybe years. I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, trying to reconcile her cruelty with the concept of maternal love I'd always hoped for but never quite experienced. "Good to know," I said finally, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. Without another word, I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room full of staring relatives, and out the front door. No one tried to stop me. No one called after me. The silence was confirmation enough. This wasn't just Mom's doing. Somehow, I had become the family pariah, and no one was willing to stand up for me. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. First, to the villa owners in Montepulciano, canceling our reservation. Second, to the travel agency handling our flights and tours, canceling everything. Third, to my bank, transferring the entire $56,300 from the dedicated vacation account back to my personal savings. With each cancellation, each transfer, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. The dream I'd held for Dad was dying, but something else was being born, a realization that I deserved better than this, better than being the family scapegoat. As I drove away from my childhood home, I sent one final text to my father. "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry I won't be at your birthday celebration. I hope someday you'll understand why." Then I blocked everyone's numbers. Mom, Tyler, Rebecca, all the extended family who had stood in silent complicity. Everyone except Dad. His line would always remain open. The Italy dream was over. The fantasy of family healing was shattered. But as painful as this moment was, I couldn't have imagined how completely everything would change by morning. My apartment had never felt so empty. I'd always prided myself on its minimalist aesthetic, clean lines, neutral colors, carefully curated furniture, but that night, it felt like a hotel room, impersonal and cold. I moved through the space like a ghost, going through the motions of existence without fully inhabiting my body. In the kitchen, I uncorked a bottle of Italian Chianti I'd been saving for a pre-trip celebration. Poetic, drinking it alone on the night I canceled everything. The rich red liquid swirled in my glass like blood, like all the family ties severed in a single afternoon. At some point, I found myself sitting on my balcony, watching the Chicago skyline twinkle against the darkening sky. 12 floors up, the city noise was muted, creating the illusion of solitude in a metropolis of millions. My phone remained face down on the coffee table inside. I couldn't bear to see the notifications that might be piling up. Or worse, the absence of them. The doorbell rang at 9:30, startling me from my trance. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer, my best friend since college, holding a paper bag that clinked with the unmistakable sound of bottles. "I brought reinforcements," she said when I opened the door, pulling out wine, chocolate, and ice cream. "Your text sounded apocalyptic. What happened?" For the next 2 hours, I poured everything out. The months of planning, the growing resistance, the ambush party planning, and finally, my mother's devastating declaration. Jennifer listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to outrage. "That's seriously messed up," she said finally, refilling our glasses. "I always knew your mom was difficult, but this is next level." "The worst part is that Dad doesn't even know," I said, the wine loosening the knot of emotion in my chest. "They've been making decisions about his birthday, excluding me, all while pretending it's what he wants." "Have you tried calling him directly? On his work phone, maybe?" I shook my head. "I don't want to put him in the middle. If Mom's capable of this level of manipulation, who knows what she'd do if I interfered with her plans." "So what now?" Jennifer asked gently. "You've canceled everything?" "Everything. The villa, the flights, the private tours, the cooking class, all of it." The reality of it hit me anew with each item I listed. 2 years of planning, gone in 3 phone calls. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "What if you still went?" "What?" "To Italy. What if you still went? Not for your dad's birthday, but for yourself." The idea seemed so foreign, so selfish, that I almost dismissed it immediately. But something about it caught in my mind, a tiny spark of possibility. "I don't know," I said slowly. "The whole point was to give Dad this experience. And that was incredibly generous," Jennifer affirmed. "But maybe this is the universe telling you to do something for yourself for once." "When was your last real vacation? One that wasn't about work or family obligations?" I couldn't remember. Maybe that girls' weekend in Nashville 3 years ago? Even that had been cut short by a work emergency. "You've been saving for 2 years, Jennifer continued. "The money's there. You clearly need a break from your family drama. Why not use this opportunity to take care of yourself for once?" She had a point. The money was sitting in my account, freed from its designated purpose. I had already requested time off work. All the research was done. I probably knew more about Tuscany than most tour guides at this point. I could do a solo trip, I mused, the idea taking tentative root. Completely different itinerary. Focus on what I want to see. Jennifer nodded encouragingly. Exactly. Sleep in, drink wine at lunch, flirt with gorgeous Italian men, do whatever the hell you want without worrying about anyone else's needs or preferences. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I felt a flicker of something other than hurt, a tiny flame of anticipation, of possibility. I wouldn't keep all the original bookings, I thought aloud. Different regions maybe. Not the family villa. Jennifer grabbed my laptop, placing it on the coffee table between us. "Let's look at options right now. Nothing commits you to anything, but let's just explore." For the next hour, we browsed boutique hotels in Florence, countryside agriturismos in Umbria, beachfront apartments in Cinque Terre. With each search, each virtual tour, the idea became less theoretical, more tangible. "This one," I said finally, pointing to a restored medieval tower in a small hilltop town. It's completely different from anything I'd planned for the family trip. Just one bedroom, private terrace with a view of the valley. Jennifer grinned. Book it. Right now. Before you overthink it. My finger hovered over the Reserve Now button, a strange mixture of guilt and liberation warring within me. Was it wrong to still go to Italy when Dad couldn't? Was I betraying him somehow? He would want you to go, Jennifer said softly, reading my hesitation. From everything you've told me about your dad over the years, he would absolutely want you to take this trip for yourself. She was right. Dad had always encouraged my independence, my adventures. He'd been the one to help me move to Chicago when Mom thought it was too far from home. He'd supported my solo backpacking trip through the Pacific Northwest after college when Mom insisted it was too dangerous for a young woman alone. With sudden clarity, I pressed the button. Confirmation email received. First concrete step toward reclaiming this journey as my own. We spent another hour booking flights, direct to Rome, no layovers, researching car rentals, small enough for narrow Italian roads, big enough for my luggage, and plotting a preliminary itinerary that was completely different from the family plan. By midnight, Operation Solo Italy was officially underway. Jennifer left around 1, after extracting a promise that I would keep her updated on all developments. For the first time that day, I felt something like peace as I prepared for bed. The hurt was still there, the rejection still raw, but alongside it was a new determination. This family crisis wouldn't define me. I would rewrite this narrative on my own terms. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb mode before sliding into bed, allowing myself the mercy of uninterrupted sleep. Tomorrow would be time enough to deal with the aftermath of today's confrontation. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through blinds I'd forgotten to close. I reached automatically for my phone, then hesitated, bracing myself for whatever awaited. 18 missed calls. 37 text messages. 3 voicemails. Most of the calls were from Tyler, with a few from Mom and several from numbers I didn't recognize, probably concerned relatives. The texts ranged from Mom's terse, "Call me immediately," to lengthy paragraphs from aunts and cousins I rarely spoke to. I scrolled past them all, not ready to engage. But one voicemail caught my attention, from Tyler, left at 3:17 a.m. What was he doing calling at that hour? With trepidation, I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. "Olivia, it's me." Tyler's voice sounded strange, hoarse, emotional in a way I hadn't heard since we were children. "I need to talk to you." God, I've messed up. We've all messed up. Mom's been lying to everyone, including Dad. He never knew about the Italy trip you planned. She told him you refused to attend any birthday celebration for him. He's been devastated thinking you didn't want to be part of his birthday. A long pause, the sound of a shaky breath. "Call me back. Please. Dad deserves to know the truth." I sat frozen, phone clutched in suddenly cold fingers, as the full implications of his message sank in. Dad didn't know. All this time, he had no idea what I'd been planning. Instead, he believed I'd abandoned him on his milestone birthday. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just manipulation and exclusion, but deliberate deception that damaged my relationship with my father. The one pure, uncomplicated family bond one thought I had. With trembling hands, I unblocked Tyler's number and called him back. He answered on the first ring. "Olivia, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all night." "Explain," I said, my voice hardly recognizable to my own ears. "Explain exactly what's been happening." And he did. For the next 45 minutes, Tyler unraveled a web of deception so intricate, so calculated, that I could hardly believe it involved my own family. Mom had intercepted my early planning emails to Dad, deleted text messages I'd sent about the trip, and systematically misrepresented my intentions to everyone. To Dad, she claimed I was too busy with work to attend any birthday celebration. To extended family, she suggested I was selfishly trying to monopolize Dad with an exclusive trip no one else could afford to join. To Tyler and Rebecca, She painted me as dismissive of their input and controlling of all birthday plans. Why? I asked, struggling to comprehend the level of malice involved. Why would she do this? Tyler's sigh carried the weight of painful realization. I think she's always been jealous of your relationship with Dad. You two have always had this connection that she could never touch. When you started planning this amazing experience for him, something she could never have conceived of doing, she decided to destroy it rather than let it happen, I finished, the pieces falling into horrible place. I should have questioned her more, Tyler admitted, his voice heavy with regret. The stories never quite added up, but it was easier to believe them than to consider the alternative. I'm so sorry, Liv. I failed you as a brother. The apology, unexpected and sincere, cracked something in my carefully maintained composure. Tears I'd been holding back all night suddenly flowed freely. How did you find out the truth? I managed to ask. Dad found one of your original Italy brochures hidden in Mom's desk drawer last night. He asked her about it, and she... Tyler paused. She couldn't keep the story straight. The more he questioned, the more she contradicted herself. Then he called the bank and discovered a large withdrawal she couldn't explain. Apparently, she took money from their joint account for the party planning. That's when everything unraveled. Where's Dad now? It was the only question that really mattered to me. At Uncle Patrick's. He couldn't stay in the house with her after everything came out. He's devastated, Liv. Not just about the trip, but about Mom manipulating everyone, turning family against each other. I closed my eyes, imagining my father's pain at discovering this level of betrayal from his wife of nearly 40 years. What do we do now? I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted despite just waking up. I think we need to meet, all three of us. You, me, and Dad. Figure out how to move forward. Then eventually confront Mom together so she can't manipulate the narrative anymore. It was strange hearing Tyler take charge like this, strange hearing him on my side after months of opposition. But there was something cathartic about it too, the possibility of alliance where there had been division. Okay, I agreed. Set it up. But Tyler, yeah? This doesn't immediately fix everything between us. You believed the worst about me for months, without ever giving me the chance to explain. I know, he said quietly. I have a lot to make up for. To both you and Dad. But I want to start trying, if you'll let me. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was an opening, a crack in the wall that had separated us for longer than either of us wanted to admit. Set up the meeting, I repeated. We'll start there. As I ended the call, I sat in the morning sunlight, trying to process everything. The hurt was still there, but alongside it now was something else, a strange mix of vindication and renewed grief. The family fractures ran deeper than I'd ever imagined, but for the first time, I wasn't the only one who could see them. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Dad wants to see you. Today, if possible. He's heartbroken about everything you planned that he never knew about. I typed back immediately. Tell him I'm coming. And Tyler? Don't let Mom know. Some confrontations could wait. Reconnecting with my father couldn't. Uncle Patrick's lakeside cabin had always been a refuge. Growing up, we'd spent summer weekends there fishing, swimming, and telling ghost stories around the fire pit. Finding my father there now, sitting alone on the weathered dock, his reflection wavering in the water below, broke my heart in ways I hadn't anticipated. He looked older somehow, shoulders slightly hunched, the spring sun highlighting the silver that had overtaken his once dark hair. He didn't turn as I approached, though the creaking wooden planks surely announced my arrival. Dad? My voice came out small, like a child's. When he turned, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Olivia. He stood shakily, opening his arms. I walked into his embrace, feeling the familiar solidity of him despite everything. We stood there silently, the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore providing the only soundtrack to our reunion. Tyler told me everything, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. About Italy. About what you planned for my birthday. I wanted it to be perfect, I whispered against his shoulder. Your ancestral village, the family records, the villa overlooking the vineyards. He tightened his hold. It would have been the most thoughtful gift anyone's ever tried to give me. We moved to the wooden bench at the end of the dock, sitting side by side as we had countless times before. For several minutes, we just watched the water, the comfortable silence that had always existed between us gradually returning. I need to understand what happened, I said eventually. Why Mom would do this? Dad sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. Your mother has always been complicated. Insecure in ways that weren't always visible to others. But this level of deception? Turning the whole family against me. I think it started small, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. A little resentment about your close relationship with me, a little jealousy about your financial success. Then when you started planning something she could never have come up with herself. It snowballed, I finished. Your mother needs to be needed, Dad continued. She needs to be the center of the family universe. Your independence has always threatened that somehow. The explanation made a certain kind of sense, but it didn't excuse the hurt, the deliberate cruelty. Tyler mentioned Mom told you I refused to attend your birthday celebration, I said carefully. Did you believe her? Pain flickered across his face. I questioned it. It didn't sound like you. But when weeks passed with no word from you about my birthday, when you seemed to avoid the topic whenever we spoke. He trailed off, the implication clear. In the absence of truth, doubt had crept in. She intercepted my messages to you, I said, the realization still fresh and painful. Deleted emails, hid brochures. I thought you knew about Italy all along. I didn't, he said simply. Not until I found this. From his jacket pocket, he pulled a folded pamphlet, one of the many Italy brochures I'd brought to family gatherings. This one detailed the Tuscan cooking class I'd booked, featuring smiling participants making pasta by hand. It fell out of a book in your mother's nightstand when I was looking for reading glasses. When I asked her about it, her story kept changing. First, she said you'd considered Italy but abandoned the idea. Then that you'd planned it without consulting anyone. Then that you'd demanded everyone pay their own way for an extravagant trip no one could afford. None of that was true, I said quietly. I know that now. He folded the brochure carefully, returning it to his pocket. The more she talked, the more obvious it became that something was wrong. I called the bank about some unusual withdrawals, and the manager mentioned your large transfers from yesterday, canceling everything. I nodded, remembering the grim satisfaction of reclaiming the money I'd saved so carefully. Tyler showed up during the discussion. That followed. Dad continued. Your mother tried to maintain her version of events, but by then I knew enough to question everything. Tyler finally broke down and admitted what he knew, how your mother had been systematically turning everyone against you, how she'd organized this elaborate party planning committee specifically to exclude you. And the part about not being welcome at your birthday party? I asked, the words still bitter in my mouth. Dad's expression darkened. Tyler told me. I still can't believe your mother would say that to you. To anyone, but especially to her own daughter. The validation of my hurt, the acknowledgement of the cruelty I'd experienced, loosened something tight in my chest. For months, I'd questioned my own perceptions, wondered if I was overreacting. Hearing my father confirm the wrongness of it all was unexpectedly healing. I left her at the house last night, Dad said after a moment. Told her I needed space to think. Patrick's always kept a key under the flower pot for me, fishing trips and all that. Came out here to clear my head, figure out what happens next. What has happened next? I asked. I honestly don't know, sweetheart. For the first time, I heard the full weight of his pain. 40 years of marriage, and I feel like I never really knew her. The level of manipulation, the deliberate cruelty toward you, it's shaken everything I thought I understood about our life together. The implication hung in the air between us, that this revelation might be the end of my parents' marriage. As hurt as I was, the thought brought no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for my father's pain. I'm so sorry, I said, not sure what exactly I was apologizing for: the situation, the revelations, the difficult road ahead. Dad squeezed my hand. None of this is your fault, Olivia. Never think that. A car door slammed in the distance, and soon Tyler appeared at the top of the path leading to the dock. He approached hesitantly, looking between us with uncertainty. Is this a private conversation, or can anyone join? Dad patted the space beside him. We were just getting to the part where we figure out what to do about your mother. Tyler sat, completing our unlikely trio. I've been thinking about that. I think we need to confront her together, present a united front so she can't continue manipulating the narrative. Agreed, I said. But what's the goal of the confrontation? Reconciliation? Consequences? Understanding? All of the above, Dad said firmly. I need to understand how deep this goes, how long she's been turning my children against each other. You both deserve accountability for how she's treated you. And yes, eventually, there needs to be a path towards some kind of healing, though what that looks like, I don't know yet. We should talk to Rebecca, too, Tyler added. She suspected something was off for weeks, but couldn't quite put her finger on it. Mom's been feeding her a different version of events than the one she told me. Divide and conquer, I murmured. Classic manipulation tactic. We spent the next hour comparing notes, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of the past few months. The picture that emerged was disturbing, a systematic campaign by my mother to isolate me from family events, while positioning herself as the victim of my supposed selfishness. I can't believe I fell for it, Tyler said, shaking his head. Looking back, the inconsistencies were so obvious. She's had decades of practice, Dad said quietly. Don't be too hard on yourself. As our conversation wound down, practical matters arose. The birthday was still 2 months away. The party planning was well underway. And most importantly, my father's long-held dream of visiting his ancestral village remained unfulfilled. What about Italy? Tyler asked eventually. Is it too late to salvage any of it? I hesitated. I canceled everything yesterday. The villa, the flights, the private tours, all gone. But you could rebook something similar, couldn't you? Dad asked, a hint of his old enthusiasm returning. Maybe not the exact same accommodations, but the same experience? I suppose I could, I said slowly. But it would be different now. Smaller scale, maybe just you and Dad? Tyler suggested. That might be for the best, honestly. A father-daughter trip, focused on what matters most, connecting with the family history. The suggestion surprised me, both its content and its source. The Tyler of 2 days ago would never have proposed excluding himself from such a significant family event. You wouldn't mind? I asked carefully. He shook his head. This was always about Dad experiencing his heritage. The family dynamics got in the way of that. Maybe simplifying is the answer. You two go, connect with the Italian relatives, see the ancestral village. The rest of us can have a small celebration when you return. Dad looked at me, hope cautiously rekindling in his eyes. What do you think, Olivia? Could we salvage the dream? Looking at him, this good man who had always supported me, always believed in me, I knew there was only one possible answer. I'll start making calls tomorrow, I promised. It won't be exactly the same, but we'll make it work. The relief on his face was worth every canceled reservation, every difficult conversation ahead. What about Mom? Tyler asked, bringing us back to the immediate issue. Dad straightened his shoulders, decision made. We talk to her tomorrow. All of us together. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Whatever happens after that, we'll face it as a family. A real family, not the illusion she's been orchestrating. As we walked back to our cars, something shifted between the three of us, some new understanding, some tentative alliance born from shared pain and truth. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Confronting my mother, rebuilding trust between us, navigating whatever changes might come to our family structure, all of it loomed large and daunting. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in facing it. And that made all the difference. The confrontation with my mother was every bit as difficult as we had anticipated. Seated in the living room where I'd been told I wasn't welcome just days before, we formed a triangle of truth around her: Dad, Tyler, and me, united in our demand for honesty. At first, she tried denial, then deflection, then tears. When those tactics failed against our united front, anger flared, decades of resentment bubbling to the surface. The things she said that day, about my relationship with Dad, about her feelings of exclusion throughout our family history, about her perception of being undervalued and overlooked, were painful to hear, but necessary to understand. "You've always been his favorite," she spat at me, abandoning all pretense. "From the day you were born, I was secondary in his life. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch your husband bond with your daughter in ways he never connected with you." The raw hurt in her voice was genuine, even if her actions remained inexcusable. Dad listened in stunned silence, hearing for the first time the depth of insecurity that had shaped our family dynamics for decades. "Why didn't you ever talk to me about this?" he asked finally. 39 years of marriage, Caroline, and you never once expressed feeling this way. "Would it have changed anything?" she countered. "Would you have loved her less? Been less proud of her accomplishments? Spent less time teaching her everything you know?" "That's not how love works," Dad said gently. "It's not a finite resource to be divided up. Loving Olivia never diminished what I felt for you." My mother's composure crumbled then, decades of misplaced resentment giving way to the first genuine vulnerability I'd ever witnessed from her. Tyler moved to sit beside her, an act of compassion that surprised me given everything that had happened. "Mom," he said quietly, "you need help. Professional help. What you did, lying to all of us, turning us against each other, that goes beyond normal family conflict. That was calculated and cruel." She didn't deny it. Progress of a sort. By the end of that long, exhausting day, 3 things had been established. First, my mother would begin therapy to address the deep-seated insecurities and resentments that had driven her behavior. Second, Dad would temporarily move into the condo he kept near campus for late work nights, creating space for both of them to process what had happened. And third, the Italy trip would proceed as planned, a father-daughter journey to connect with our heritage. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of planning and healing. As I researched new accommodations and rebuilt our itinerary, my relationship with Tyler underwent its own renovation. Weekly dinners with him and Rebecca became a time to dismantle old misunderstandings and build new trust. The brother who had once seemed like a distant competitor slowly became a genuine ally. Dad threw himself into Italian language lessons with renewed vigor. "I want to greet our Italian cousins properly," he explained during our planning sessions, butchering pronunciations with enthusiastic determination. His joy in the preparations was untainted by the family drama, a gift I hadn't expected but deeply treasured. Mom's journey was more complicated. Therapy twice weekly revealed patterns of insecurity and control stretching back to her own childhood. Understanding didn't excuse her actions, but it provided context that made forgiveness seem possible, eventually, with time and consistent change. 2 months after the confrontation, Dad and I boarded a flight to Rome. The Italy trip had transformed from its original conception, smaller in scale but perhaps richer in purpose. Just the 2 of us, following the thread of family history back to its source. Tuscany welcomed us with golden sunlight and rolling hills that seemed to embody serenity itself. Our accommodations, a small apartment in a converted medieval tower, couldn't have been more different from the family villa I'd originally booked. Yet something about its intimate scale, its ancient stones warmed by centuries of sun, felt exactly right for our journey. On our 3rd day, we drove to the small village of Castellina, where Dad's grandfather had been born before emigrating to America in 1912. The narrow streets and weathered buildings hadn't changed much in the intervening century, creating the uncanny sensation of walking through our own history. The local records office was a single room in the municipal building, overseen by an elderly woman who clapped with delight when we explained our connection to the village. Valsecchi, she exclaimed, recognizing the original family name. C.S.I. Una famiglia annica di Castellina. Through her broken English and our embarrassing Italian, supplemented by a translation app, we learned that several branches of the Valsecchi family still lived in the region. One phone call later, and we were invited to Sunday lunch at the home of Giovanni Ricci, whose grandmother had been a Valsecchi before marriage. That Sunday became the emotional heart of our journey. Seated at a long table under a pergola draped with grapevines, surrounded by Italian cousins 3 and 4 times removed, Dad wept openly when Giovanni produced family records dating back to the 1800s. Your grandfather, Antonio, Giovanni explained through his college-aged daughter who spoke excellent English, was remembered as the adventurer who sought fortune in America. His brother Matteo stayed here and maintained the family olive grove. You are descended from 2 brothers with different dreams, but the same blood. We spent hours poring over yellowed documents and faded photographs, piecing together connections across time and ocean. Dad's face throughout was a study in wonder, every new discovery lighting him up from within. Thank you, he whispered to me that night as we walked back to our apartment under a canopy of stars. For finding this, for making it happen despite everything. This has been the greatest gift of my life. The rest of our trip unfolded like a dream. Cooking classes where we learned family recipes older than America itself, tours of ancient cities where our ancestors had walked, quiet evenings sipping local wine on our terrace while discussing everything from philosophy to family memories. Free from the tensions that had defined our family dynamic for so long, Dad and I discovered new dimensions to our relationship, deeper conversations than had ever been possible at home. We returned to America changed, connected not just to our ancestral past, but to a new understanding of what family could mean when built on honesty and mutual respect. The homecoming was both easier and harder than anticipated. Mom met us at the airport, her usual polished exterior softened by 2 months of therapy and reflection. The hug she gave me was tentative but genuine, perhaps the first authentic embrace we'd shared in my adult life. I'd like to hear about your trip, she said as we walked to the parking garage. If you're willing to share it with me. It was a small olive branch, offered with unprecedented humility. I accepted it with cautious optimism. The family birthday dinner that followed a week later was modest compared to the elaborate party originally planned. Just the 5 of us, Dad, Mom, Tyler, Rebecca, and me at Dad's favorite steakhouse. No banners, no extended family, no performance of perfect family harmony. Instead, something more valuable. Honest conversation, careful listening, and the first fragile shoots of healing. Over the following year, our family landscape continued to shift and settle into new patterns. Mom and Dad eventually reunited under one roof, their marriage fundamentally altered, but perhaps stronger for having survived its greatest test. Weekly family therapy sessions became monthly, then quarterly as new communication patterns took root. My relationship with Mom would never be simple or entirely comfortable, but it became something I hadn't expected: authentic. The pretense of perfect mother-daughter harmony was replaced by careful respect and growing understanding. We would never be best friends, but we were learning to be honest allies in the complex business of family. Tyler and I rediscovered the sibling bond that had been buried under years of maternal manipulation. Sunday brunches became our tradition, a time to maintain the connection we'd nearly lost completely. As for Dad and me, our shared Italian adventure became a touchstone, a perfect memory we could return to whenever family waters grew turbulent. The photo of us with our Italian relatives, olive trees stretching to the horizon behind us, took pride of place on his office desk, a reminder of the journey that had begun in betrayal but ended in profound connection. 1 year later, on Dad's 61st birthday, we gathered again, this time at a small Italian restaurant owned by a chef from Castellina who had become our friend during our stay. As we shared dishes made from recipes older than our American family history, I realized how completely the narrative had transformed. The mother who had once told me I wasn't welcome at my father's celebration now sat across from me, sharing stories of her own therapy journey with unexpected vulnerability. The brother who had once been her unwitting accomplice now raised a glass in my direction, acknowledging without words how far we'd come. And Dad, watching it all with quiet satisfaction, seemed younger somehow, unburdened by the weight of family secrets and unspoken resentments. "A toast," he said, lifting his glass of Chianti. "To truth, to healing, and to the understanding that family isn't something we're given. It's something we create together, every day, through choices and forgiveness and love." We clinked glasses, the simple sound sealing a complex promise. Looking around that table, I understood something essential about the nature of family wounds and healing. The scars would always be there, visible in certain lights, tender to certain touches. But scars also represented survival, resilience, the body's remarkable capacity to repair itself after injury. Our family had been broken open, its darkest dynamics exposed to painful light. Yet from that breaking had come the possibility of authentic connection, messy, imperfect, but real in a way that our previous carefully maintained facade had never been. As I drove home that night, windows down to catch the summer breeze, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my adult life. The journey hadn't been what I expected. They rarely are. But it had led exactly where I needed to go. Have you ever experienced a painful family revelation that ultimately led to healing? Or found yourself excluded from something important only to discover it opened a better path? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that even the most painful family dynamics can transform with courage and truth. Thank you for listening to my journey. May your own path lead to the healing you deserve.